Hi, everybody. I'm Tom Schade, and this is The VUU. We're delighted to have you with us today. We're going to be talking with some very interesting guests. Meg is under the weather, but she will be joining us. But let's start with our regulars and find out what they're up to. How about you, Aisha? We'll start with you.
I'm Aisha Hauser. I'm in Seattle, Washington at my other neighbor's house this week, and I am hosting. So I'm pinch hitting for Bob LaValle, who's traveling today.
All right, at the turntables, our DJ, Aisha Hauser. You said they have a theater there, a theater room?
Yeah, it's comfy chairs and a TV screen, so it's not theater.
They used to call those dens.
Right. Yeah.
Well, how about you, Joanna?
I don't know, Aisha. You kind of still have that I've been kidnapped kind of thing going on. They've just moved you to another undisclosed location. Hi everyone. I am Joanna Fontaine Crawford. I am here in Austin, Texas, where the bluebonnets and everything is blooming, or so they tell me, because with allergies I can just barely open my eyes to see. So I had to, where normal people, are shoveling the snow, I come out to my car and it's just covered with yellow pollen. So we're, making pollen snow angels and doing those things.
Very Eastery. Very Eastery.
Yes.
Is South by Southwest still going on?
It is, I believe it is over, and so
Okay.
Traffic can get back to its normal horribleness.
Okay. All right. Hey, how about you, Hank? What's up?
Hey, folks. I am Hank Purse. I am speaking to you from Medford, Massachusetts, our home in Medford, and life is good. It's Holy Week. So though at the church I'm serving right now, the First Parish in Milton, we don't have a Maundy Thursday service, but we had communion last Sunday. We got the silver out of the MFA, out of the Museum of Fine Arts, who holds our silver for us, and so we just got a couple of tankards out this year, and a tankard and a couple of beakers, worth of like $50,000, just the small stuff, and had a very nice communion service, and now just getting ready for Easter.
And Meg, how are you?
Hey, I love it that.
Oh, Meg's not feeling well, and I think her computer's sick too.
Wait, can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you now.
I'm sorry, it muted itself. I was saying I hadn't really realized that it was Maundy Thursday when we booked humanism and atheism as our topic. But that's so CLF, and then tonight we're hosting, for the Christian Fellowship, we're hosting a Maundy Thursday service. Rosemary Bray McNatt is preaching, and Jason Sheldon's doing the music. It should be really good, so I hope people will tune in again, and I just love that. I love working in an environment where that's just normal.
You've been sick, Meg? Are you better, or are you still?
This crud has just knocked me flat. CLF's theme this month was brokenness, and between my kid getting sick, my dog getting sick, and me getting sick, I'd say we did our best to embody it. I'm going back to the doctor today and just going to throw a fit until they give me something to kill this. Because, I went last week and they said, you don't have pneumonia, come back in a week if you still have it. And I do. So I had to miss, I didn't fly to Boston for our board meeting. I had to stay home and Zoom in, and didn't get to see Hank, didn't get to see people. So I'm ready to be well, even though I was feeling all upbeat because it was really warm here and it snowed yesterday, which was actually very cozy. Felt very good to be sick and kind of cuddled into a chair in the snow. So thanks for hosting, Tom. My voice might get on your nerves. It doesn't hurt. I want you to know that.
Oh, I think your voice sounds really just fine. Just fine. So, anything going on in our communities that we need to report? There was the people listening in on the Black Lives, the UU call last night. There was also the time to escalate call last night that I saw in my Twitter feed? Did anybody catch any of that? Nope. Okay.
I was just laid there in my chair.
All right.
Yesterday I was at least alert enough for a while to watch my news feed more than I have, and the number of anti-trans bills coming down the pike really is flabbergasted, including one in Kansas where students would get paid $2,500, or anyone. If you saw someone using a bathroom which wasn't the gender of their birth, you could report them and get paid. And so I had this idea we should make politicians pay $2,500 every time they say or do things that are bullying or we could be a very rich country if we did that right now.
There's not enough money in the world.
We have a lot of very rich politicians, though, so we could get some real cash. Just think of feeding that money to, to advocacy organizations and self-organizing groups.
Right.
Go ahead, Joanna.
So did y'all? This is notable because it never happens. Politicians never say they were wrong. Did y'all see this about Paul Ryan?
Yes. Yeah. Wow.
What did he say? He said he was wrong?
No. Paul Ryan in a speech was referencing. Remember how he had been the person last election cycle talking about the giver, the takers, and the makers.
Yeah.
And he apologized for that. He said, I've been talking to people, and, a single mom who's just trying to put food on the table, I should never have referred to someone like that as a taker. And then he actually said, I was wrong. So there's a whole lot of buzz right now because if a politician says something that honest, the feeling is, okay, there's what's the catch? What's the motivation here? Is this because, and a lot of people saying, oh, well, it's because he is hoping to position himself as a moderate, swoop in and get the Republican nomination.
Republicanism with the human face.
I read about it because I put it on Facebook, and then a free-for-all broke out.
Oh, yeah?
And of people saying, don't trust a word he says, he didn't mean it. And then others saying that Simone Campbell, the Nuns on the Bus head of network, had met with him about policy, and they think that she had influence on him. So I'm going to take every sign of hope I can. I want to see the policies, but
yeah.
Well, he is a Catholic. He became a Catholic, right? When you're an Ayn Rand objectivist, you're usually atheist, but then a lot of them have converted to Catholicism, especially if they go into politics. But the hardcore Ayn Rand types are atheists. That's my experience and observation. Everybody has muted themselves except me, so I get to run this thing.
Joanna, it looked like you were talking even though you're muted. Is that my computer going crazy again?
That's just that's your computer. But I will say I agree with this thing of, in our churches we often talk about starve dysfunction, feed health. So, let's give this politician a ton of love and support for showing humility, showing honesty. Who knows? Maybe some other politicians will decide that it is just kooky enough to work.
Well, I don't know how to transition from that to our guests, but
that's what I thought. That's what I thought you were doing with the whole Ayn Rand thing. That's what I was like. Whoa, Tom's going rogue here, talking about Ayn Rand. So that's what we're going to be talking about today is Ayn Rand and atheists.
No. We have a couple of people from the Humanist Institute and from the Minneapolis First Unitarian Church on Mount Curve, a lovely church. I've worshipped there at least once. I'm not sure if they,
it's not. That is a society, baby.
Oh, that's right. That is right. First Unitarian Society on Mount Curve, and a lovely place. And I did something quite.
There you go, folks. All right. It's
Deep
the
and meaningful there on a Sunday morning. I don't know.
The
if they
drinking
do
game
that.
starts now. Okay, whenever we say church instead of society, have a drink. Is that right? Is that what's going on?
It's way too early in the morning for me to start, right? So, but our guests today, I should stop goofing around. Our guests today are the Reverend David Breeden, who is the senior minister at the First Unitarian Society of Minneapolis, and Kevin Jago, who is the director of, let's see, I got to get this right. He is the director of, youth director at First Unitarian Society, and he is the director in marketing and development at the Humanist Institute. And Meg will be happy to know, if she doesn't already, that he's an incoming fellow at the Church of the Larger Fellowship next year, and he's a student at Meadville, Lombard. Hello, David. Hello, Kevin.
Hello. Great to be here.
Well, first question, why don't you tell us what humanism is, in case there's people out there who are a little unclear or who have misconceptions about it.
My working definition of humanism is that humanism is an evidence-based value system dedicated to saving or helping the human flourish and saving the planet. The next question usually is, are you all atheists? And I say no. For one thing, it's evidence-based, so as soon as we find some evidence for a God, we're there. It's a no-brainer from that point. A lot of us haven't seen that, so some of us are atheists or agnostics, but we try to be what I call a religion-neutral zone here. We don't talk about religion in the congregation on Sundays, so we don't denigrate religion, we just don't talk about it.
Kevin, how does that work with youth?
Yeah, well, one thing that I would add on to David's definition is that one thing that we've talked about at First Unitarian Society on Sunday mornings and in the youth program here is that what First Unitarian Society has been putting out into the world for a very long time and has been kind of re-articulated by David more recently is that we're proposing this radical notion that human effort is enough to solve human problems. And I believe David actually coined that phrase himself. So this idea with our youth program here is we're looking at what does it mean to be a humanist and a UU? Are we and are the youth both or neither? You know, because that's an open question in our youth program. Are they Unitarian Universalists as they've come up? You know, we in our program are really open-minded about. We do a very similar program in religious education around things like neighboring faiths, OWL, these are credo writing in our coming of age program. So it's this idea like here are many, many traditions. Now it's up to you to choose as you become a teenager and a youth here at FUS. And what happens is most of our youth identify as humanists, and most of our youth identify as Unitarian Universalists, but not all, and that's okay. So in our youth program, it's really about what are we doing here to equip our youth with the tools that they need to find community after they graduate from our program, because while some of them might still be in the Twin Cities and have First Unitarian Society here locally, many won't. Many go off to college elsewhere. So this idea of how are they evaluating communities, what's most important to them? Is it that it's any community that says they are Unitarian Universalist and that's what's most important to them, and what the theological mix of that community isn't as important? Or is it that they're looking for a non-theistic community and it's great if it's also UU? And I think that some of our youth balance that differently. And we've talked about that, how First Unitarian Society is, in the nation, a relatively unique place. So the idea that they're going to find a place just like ours around the corner is not going to happen. So it's more about what aspects of First Unitarian Society are most important to them in their identity. Is it that they don't talk about God, or is it that they are UU, and are they really trying to find that place where they can be both fully?
Right. Well, and you know, we should mention that I'm getting it. We should mention that the Twin Cities is very unique in UUism in general, in that we have several large congregations, and Many of them have kept their unique historical past. So we became humanist in 1916 when John Dietrich was called as the minister. He was already calling himself humanist, and they immediately took up that title when he arrived at this congregation. We've always been humanist. First Universalist has pretty well stuck with the Universalist message. Unity over in St. Paul is very much an old line Unitarian theistic congregation. So we have some interesting variety, and I think actually that makes us even more rich in terms of getting more people interested in Unitarian Universalism because we have such variety here.
So it sounds like rather than having kind of a big tent approach, which happens in many churches, each church can really specialize and kind of stake out their territory.
Yeah. Well, you realize that in 1961 at the merger, First Universalist and First Unitarian are a 10-minute drive apart. So if they hadn't stayed different, there wouldn't be any reason for two of them to have stayed in existence, basically. So.
It may have been a 10-minute drive then. I think it's longer now, isn't it?
It's according to Sunday morning.
Okay.
And that's something that is a unique aspect here in Minneapolis anyways, is I know people that worship at both on Sunday.
Yeah.
They will go to one service at one and then one service at the other, or coffee hour at one. So people are building an experience in the Twin Cities that I think you can't really find in many other places in the world as well, where you can come and hear a humanist service and then go down the road and hear a very universalist service and chat with people at both of those communities.
Mm-hmm.
That's great. And can I just, having grown up in a very humanist congregation, and Kevin, your description sounds fantastic, and being able to be really sort of honest with our young folks as they head out to college is just so important, and I think that doesn't often happen. That being able to sort of say what's most important to you in your own needs, being able to sort of say, do you need a humanist situation? Do you need a UU situation? That's so great. And I'm gonna tell, if folks will indulge me, a brief story. Just 2 weeks ago, Farley Wheelwright, who was one of my ministers growing up, passed away at the age of 99. Farley, a staunch atheist, and years later, when I was in seminary, he said, "Come over to my house. I'm going to give you some books." So I was over there, and he starts complaining about all this secret cabal of Christians who are running the UU way. He's going on and on. And I turned to him and I said, Farley, I believe in God. And Farley slowly turned towards me and he went, "Where did we go wrong?"
An indictment of the New Bedford Religious Education Department there.
I have a question from a viewer.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know, right?
Yeah.
What kind of rituals are embraced in humanist-focused congregations?
Well, that's an interesting question. I often hear, "Oh, you humanists don't have any rituals," but of course we have been doing this since 1916. God has not appeared in any ritual or liturgy here except as kind of an accident in a hymn sometimes. So we basically, I have often argued that if you set a camera up and didn't turn the sound on, that you would think you were in a Methodist church probably. Unlike the Ethical Society, we developed out of Protestantism. They developed out of the Jewish tradition, but we developed out of Protestantism. So we've always had a sort of low church Protestant way of doing things. I grew up in a Pentecostal church when I was a kid. We didn't have any candles, we didn't have any crosses, we didn't have any symbols whatsoever because all of that was considered to be a product of the Antichrist. And so we're very much like that here. We just the chalice is the only thing that we have that could be identified as being in any way religious. And we do the same thing in our rituals or liturgy. We're about breaking down hierarchy. We're about freedom, and we're about getting together to create the community that we see as equal and just. So that's what we try to do, is break it down.
Follow-up question: what do you do at Christmas and a big holiday like that?
Well, we ignore Easter. We did our big celebration last Sunday, in which I talked about Persephone and the Eleusinian mysteries. We celebrate pagan holidays basically. But Kevin, you did Christmas Eve. We have 50 people show up at Christmas Eve service.
Yeah, and to loop back to the rituals question, I would say though, well, if you turn off the camera, you wouldn't see a difference necessarily in what we do. We do hit all of the major rituals that any UU congregation would. So we have a coming of age service for our youth. We have baby welcomings. We have, weddings happen here frequently. Memorials happen here all the time. So all of those major rituals of the cycle of life happen here, just without God being invoked most of the time if they're coming here. Once again, because you have that specialist congregation in us. If you wanted something else, there are plenty of options, both within Unitarian Universalism and beyond, right in our neighborhood. There's churches galore. So there's other places that you could go if you wanted that. So people self-select here because they want what we are offering. And then what was the follow-up question? I've lost it. I had something.
Christmas Eve. What you did on Christmas Eve.
Yes, Christmas Eve. So I ran our Christmas Eve service, which was a lot of fun. I've been acting as kind of the baby intern this year because we don't have a ministerial intern, so I've got some of our extra services, and it's something that we still celebrate, but it's our smallest service of the entire year, which is very different than other congregations. So it reflects our culture here in that it's not the most important time of year for us as a community. However, the winter solstice is our biggest service a few nights earlier. Yep. So people have voted with their feet about what they want. But what we do is we sing carols. I did a short, less than 10-minute reflection about kind of what this community means to me, to kind of have it be uplifting and kind of about how great we are. I wanted it to be about that and have the people that came there. We did hot cocoa, cookies, sang carols, and we were done in about 45 minutes, and people went home. It's a very small thing, but for those 50 to 60 people, some of them have been doing that for almost a decade. So there's still a tradition there, but it's a small one, and it's definitely not the highlight of the year for most people here.
I attended Sunday services on December 27th or 28th, a long time ago at the First Unitarian Society, back when the Reverend Kendall Gibbons was the minister there. And it was December 27th, and there was not anywhere in the building that I could see any sign of the Christmas holiday. Not a, not a picture of, not even a picture of Santa Claus or, even any of the secular, manifestations of the Christmas holiday. It was like any Sunday in January. It was kind of striking to me, but there it was. So they are right. I can imagine their Christmas Eve service being the smallest of the year for them. Yes.
But I will say the building is pretty gussied up in Christmas decorations.
Greenery.
Yeah. I think we're just really efficient.
Oh, okay.
Hide all the evidence.
Yeah. But for the lead up of that month, there's
all right. Okay.
There's pine, there's lights. We have, I think, 2 or 3 Christmas trees.
Yeah. Yes, we just point out that, of course, the Christmas tree is actually a pagan symbol.
Right.
Well, yes, everybody knows that. Right.
David, you used the term religion neutral, that the society is religion neutral on Sunday. Can you tell me more about that?
Yeah, we just don't talk about it. Once in a while, I'll talk about my past. For example, I was raised Pentecostal, and so I'm not anti-Pentecostalism. All of my family still are Pentecostals. I understand it. It's just not for me. Most of the people who come to us, what happened to them is they just stop believing. And as you know, belief is not something you can force. So most people come to us out of integrity because they no longer believe what they grew up with or what they have to say with the creeds on Sunday morning. And so those are the people we attract. So they don't want to hear about it, frankly. They see it as an oppressive force, and they just don't want to talk about it.
Well, I wanted to ask you just a little side. The other question is the Humanist Institute.
Mhm.
What's that? What's that? Tell us about that.
Well, Kevin, you've been doing it a lot long. Well, Kevin is a graduate, so why don't you talk about it first, and then I'll talk about
Sure.
what we're doing now.
So yes, the Humanist Institute for me was a part of my discernment process to go to seminary. That's not true of many of our graduates that go there, but what the Humanist Institute started off as was big tent humanism in the form of a graduate program to train leaders for the humanist movement, and really meant from Unitarian Universalist humanists, humanistic Jews, and ethical culture sorts of folks to the secular humanists, atheist sorts of folks that were leading nonprofits. And this idea that a lot in the early 80s, a lot of the founders of some of these traditions or some of the people that were leading them that day were looking around the table and not knowing where their successors were going to come. Like who's gonna lead the American Humanist Association next? You know, for a long time the answer was Unitarian ministers, but they were having a harder time identifying the next round of leaders. So the idea was, well, we've got to train them. So that's kind of was the birth point of the Humanist Institute. And today, it's a center for humanist education across kind of the spectrum, from lay leaders, people that volunteer on boards, to people that want to be professional humanist leaders in some way, shape, or form. And my experience was of a almost 3-year-long program that was humanist studies and leadership at the graduate level, and it's a cohort model where you work with the same, at that time, you worked with the same folks throughout the entire program, so you got to know those people really well over the course of that time, and it's a small group, so you have lots of time to share about what you're wrestling with, and you kind of come out of it in a different place than you went in. I went in as a humanist in new UU that was not entirely sure how these two things fit together for me, and I came out really sure about that, but also much more broad in, I think, my definition of humanism, because we have people that come in as staunch atheists and are like, I'm not sure if I'm even a humanist, to people that are very open in terms of religious language, and we're all in a room together time and time again talking this out and trying to figure out who we are and what do we want the communities we work with to be and represent, how they represent humanism in the world.
Right. Well, and we should point out that the American Humanist Association does differentiate between humanists and atheists, in that atheists are anti-something and humanists are for something. So humanism is a moral commitment to bettering humanity and saving the earth. Atheism is about being against God, which seems a little bit, pointless to me, but I don't see why one wants to do that. So, that, as you know, we've been watching the Pew numbers that now about 25% of Americans are nuns, and they're nuns all the way from New Age craziness to whatever. But the new Pew report that just came out says that by 2050, 1/3 of Americans are going to be nuns. So a much higher percentage, so 1 in 3. And what are they going to do? Are they going to stay home and play video games and order pizza, or are they going to get out there and make sandwiches for the homeless and try to improve the world? And so just because someone becomes an atheist, that doesn't make me happy. I don't sit around being all schadenfreude about that. It's the question of how do people find moral commitments after they no longer believe in the average established religion.
Have you found that the new atheist writers, are they affecting your society in any way? Are you getting visitors who are reading those books and coming in?
Oh, well, yes. They were very outspoken. I think that Penn of Penn and Teller is probably one of our greatest evangelists because people like magic. His book Every Day is an Atheist Holiday, and that kind of, that which is a bit more positive than the Dawkins thing. And I think most people are pretty tired of the four horsemen of new atheism, actually, at this point. So.
And I would say, especially in younger folks, millennials and our teens, are not about necessarily disparaging people that believe in
Right.
God or gods. You know, like that's something that I think is really lost purchase for a lot of younger folks. They're just like that, like yelling at people is not something that really I want to spend a lot of time doing,
Right.
or any time, frankly. But you know, this idea that our whole movement is based on proving the other wrong doesn't work for younger people, and that
No,
it's our point here, and the purpose of being a humanist is to do something, right? Is to do something good or build something, because if you actually believe that your life, this one life is your one shot, well then this is what we have to work with. We have however many days we have, and it's time to do something with that. So a lot of, especially people in my peer group of millennials, are about making meaning out of life and making an impact. Those are kind of the two things that I hear most consistently. And going around trying to disprove other people's belief systems doesn't get a lot accomplished.
No, I mean, one of the most popular blog posts in our movement right now is Hemant Mehta, and he calls it the friendly atheist. He's a younger guy, a person of color, and that's really what's happening in humanism now. Is it's swinging much younger, much more positive, and there's a lot of people out there. Bart Campolo is another one. His father Tony was a liberal Christian. He is still alive. And Bart was well on his way to being the prince and heir apparent of his father's empire, until he said, "Wait a minute, I don't believe in God anymore." And then he said, "Wait a minute, that's an anti. I'm gonna be a humanist, and I'm gonna talk positively about what you can do after you stop believing."
Have you seen a difference in anti-Islamic? This is one of the interesting and concerning things that I've seen in atheism, or at least down here in tech, well, in a lot of areas, and that is this kind of unholy alliance between fundamentalist Christians and, using the word very specifically, atheists, this anti-Islam thing. Are you seeing any of that in humanism, or is that kind of a dividing line between humanism and atheism?
That's a basic dividing line. I mean, one of our students in the Humanist Institute, I was doing that last weekend, and we went to a masjid as a class, and one of our people who lives in New York City and was much more involved in the atheist side of things, and then came to the Humanist Institute, she came away from that experience with the imam saying, "Wait a minute, I think I've been wrong about this." So, yeah.
It seems to me that that the specific question that you are working with in terms of youth is the development of moral agency, a sense that what you do matters, that you actually have that power to do something, which is in many ways, no matter what religious tradition you're working from or what religious language you're working from, is the evangelical purpose, aside from building up membership numbers, is reaching people, saying you can have a purpose in your life and make meaning out of your life, and in many ways you have to step out of the pizza and video games life into a larger life. So as you work with youth, how does that happen? Is that something you persuade people? Is that something you inspire people, call people? How does that work?
Well, one, it happens with a lot of pizza, still.
So pizza and video games are still part of the plan.
Part of the thing. But one thing that I've noticed, at least here at FUS, is that our teens that stick with the program, because similar to almost every other religious tradition I know, after that coming of age experience, which fulfills for our tradition a lot of what happens at confirmation time, our parents are a lot more apt to let their teens choose whether or not to come on Sunday morning as well. That means we have a drop after that in terms of who comes, which is sad, but what the advantage is those are the kids that definitely want to be there, right? They're the ones that drive themselves here. One of our youth comes, even though her parents no longer come here, she comes, and she's committed. And one of the things that I think develops that level of commitment is that coming here is a practice. They don't talk about it in terms of it being a practice, but it's something that they have community here that they have nowhere else in their lives. Some of them even go to the same high school, but until we get together in youth group, some of them didn't even realize they were going to the same high school. They're so big. So the idea is that for many of these kids, they've been coming here since they were kindergartners. So even though their parents aren't coming very frequently, they're like, this is where I go on Sunday because this is what I do. So some of it is habit and practice. And then I would say the other piece that we do is really develop, what I'm trying to do in the senior high program is develop a toolbox. This idea that wherever you land in the world, you know who you are and find the community that will help you do what you want to do in the world. And that community might be a religious community. I would hope that it is something that at least accomplishes the same things that religious community does, or it might not. But it's this idea that when we have a small number of kids, especially, and the fact that people are so mobile now, I can't guarantee that they're going to have a community like FUS or even a UU community, or I can't guarantee where they're going to land. So I would hate for them to only be able to get what they need here, or to get what they need in a Sunday morning experience. So what we spend a lot of time talking about is, what is it that you most value, and what is it that you want to do with your life, this one wild ride that many of us believe we have, and what communities are going to help you accomplish that the most, and which ones are going to hold you back from doing that. And I think that for people that those answers vary quite a bit. Even in our kind of steady numbers in our senior high program are around 12 kids on Sunday morning. So it's a kind of a small to large group experience. But even in that setting, there's people that have the teens have very different answers to what matters most to them.
One thing we should make clear, because we talk a lot about humanism, is that this congregation has always dedicated itself to staying Unitarian. And that's been insistent all the way through time, and part of that is that atheism too is a creed. It is a belief system. So we don't require any creed whatsoever here, and so our religious education program is based on regular Unitarian Universalist curricula. That's what we do. Our DRE is a liberal Christian. She came back to it after having left Protestantism, and now she's a super liberal Catholic at a congregation that could only exist in a place like Minneapolis. It's a heretical Catholic congregation, but we really believe in the UU principle of raising kids to find their own meaning and purpose, whatever that is. We don't preach humanism in our RE program. So.
So what do you think are the prospects of growth of humanism at this point in time?
Our growth has really exploded. One of the things that we're doing here, we are located downtown. We're an urban congregation. So we have a big old building in a high rent district. So what do we do with that? And one of my attempts here has been to watch the numbers, and we know that a lot of congregations are going to go out of business because millennials are not joiners. You're going to have to, if they give 10% of the money that a boomer gives, then you got to have 10 times as many people in the future, and that's not likely. So what do? Well, what we do is we invite as many humanist groups into this building to use it as we can. We, the Sunday Assemblies group, which is advertises the Atheist Church, we give them our space rent-free. We also house the Humanists of Minnesota, which are the people who don't believe in going to a congregation in terms of congregational humanism. They want a lecture and they want lunch, and that's about all they want out of being a humanist. So we house those, and so if you Google humanism in Twin Cities, we happen to house all of the humanist groups in the Twin Cities. So, and that's one of our goals, is to, I would love, look at the number of Protestant churches there are scattered around. What if there were that number of humanist churches, all different, different denominational styles, etc. And that's kind of my vision for the future. I hope that does happen someday. But, one of the things we're seeing in black unbelievers and groups of that nature, we have a Stoics group in town. All of those are meetup groups, right? They don't have a physical location. But also another interesting thing about those folks is that they belong to multiple philosophical religious organizations. So so you may have 3 meetup groups you go to, and then you're going to go to a bricks and mortar place as well. And I think that's an important thing for us to remember for the future. The atheists are going to get together on Wednesday night and have pizza and beer somewhere, and that's part of what they do. But they also want to do something else about, for example, social justice, which we have a great social justice program. So how do you do that from that mindset? So that's one of the things we're doing, and we're gathering those people into the building to expand the reach of humanism and its varieties. So we are growing that way.
David, what is your attendance like on an average week or during the week, or how many would you say are members of your congregation? Do you call it a congregation?
We call it a congregation, yes, but there are some rhetorical linguistic modes you get into that you can't help saying church. That's just one of those. Just sometimes it happens. We have 465 adult members here, and on any given Sunday, somewhere between 200 and 225 show up. So we average right at 200, and then we have a lot of people downstairs volunteering to teach and that kind of thing. But in our actual assembly on Sunday morning. So one of the things we keep talking about is how are we going to invent a humanist hell to scare that other half of the members to come every Sunday. We haven't come up with that yet. But.
And tithe.
Well, yes, there is that too. Yeah. That's we definitely have the liberal tithe that goes to the Sierra Club, perhaps more than us sometimes, and we try to say, yeah, but we're the ones who's going to come visit you in the hospital, right? So, but it's a problem.
So, from your perspective, what is Unitarian Universalism? I'm not deliberately trying to be provocative, but like since you used the term religion, that your Sundays are religion neutral, and right now this is something a lot of people are really discussing. Are we a movement? Are we a what's your answer?
Well, I think both Unitarian Universalism and humanism are movements, in that the ideas exist in a lot of different places. And in one way, we just need to be here to be that catalyst for other people. For me, I think that humanism is one of the futures of Unitarian Universalism as time goes by. My argument there is that, I have a huge Methodist church right across the street from this congregation. They're 4 times as large as we are. I also know that they are becoming more and more Unitarian Universalist in every way you can imagine. So as the number of warm bodies who want to be Christian drop, those people like the liberal Presbyterians in town, the liberal Methodists, they're going to do better and better at gathering in the Christians. I mean, one of the churches in town here says, come on Sunday morning, it's not as bad as you think. So, so they're getting really smart, and they also have a rock band and a recording studio. So they're going to get more and more creative, and so I don't see us as having a strong future in Christianity itself. But we have to remain non-creedal, I believe, because some people want to stay within certain religious positions. In the 1920s, when this place was overtly humanist and it was a brand new idea, they invented the term humanist plus. And because, atheists have spouses, and how are we going to have a congregation in which everyone feels comfortable? So you can be a humanist plus, plus Christian, plus Buddhist, whatever. And we still practice that.
Right. Well, and I think that for how long have we tried to make this spectrum between God and atheism? And I love what Bob Hill said one time, which is the real thing that people are facing is a spectrum where fundamentalism is on one end and empty, rampant consumerism is on the other. And
exactly.
where do we fall in that?
Right, right, exactly. And the humanists and the Unitarian Universalists are exactly the same in our commitments to fixing the world.
And a piece that I think that drew me to Unitarian Universalism and why I didn't stick with just an AHA chapter or another sort of secular humanist group, and what I've talked with a lot of people around my age is we're looking for depth too. And I think that that's something that you need a strong history, and not that humanism doesn't have a strong history, but you need the storyteller to hold that history. And that's what our ministers often act as in our congregations, is they're the ones that bring forward the past. So I think that really the piece that Unitarian Universalism has that many, but this isn't true across the board, but that many humanist organizations don't have is a heritage. And there's a history there, there are roots there for people to be like, this might be that our ministers and our religious educators are sharing our history with people and telling that story again and again to each new person, because I think that the majority of our people are come-inners, have transitioned in from another tradition, and then they don't go through our entire Sunday school program or our entire religious education program. It's this idea that where they learn their history is often on Sunday mornings, and maybe in other different small group settings, but I'd say the biggest way is that they pick it up from up there, that message that's happening consistently. And I think that that's the piece that people, while they might be jumping around from meetup group to meetup group, kind of building their own set of communities or their own set of things that they need, the thing that they're looking for, though, in a place like this that other places aren't offering is consistency, and this idea that we're sharing a story that's been going on for a very long time. We're sharing a story that's been going on since, before the 80s, for over 100 years, for several thousand years. Like, we're part of that history, even if we're a different iteration of it. We're definitely a Protestant humanist congregation here, even though we don't often throw around the word Protestant. But we come out of something, right? There's a reason why we have pews and an organ and meet on Sunday morning. There's the hymns that we sing. Well, some of the words might be different. Came from somewhere.
Yeah. Susan Smith, who is a VUU minister, used to be the Southern Region's district executive, said something that, as someone who was raised UU, was kind of the light bulb for me, which is faith development happens through repetition, not through novelty.
That's a very, very, very good point. I mean, I think that I keep telling the story of this congregation to this congregation because I think it's very, very important. John Dietrich came here, and the people who called him are responsible for humanism really becoming congregational humanism, religious humanism. Because, I mean, if he hadn't been called by a Unitarian group, I mean, he would have just been out in the cold, unemployed, and become a college professor or something. I don't know. But it was the people in this congregation who chose a guy who had been defrocked, right, from one tradition, tried for heresy, and then called himself a humanist, and they said, sure, that's exactly what we want around here, is this heretic. And down in Des Moines, Iowa, his beer-drinking buddy and Confederate in humanism was Curtis Reese. And they were both Unitarian ministers, and they were both men who had been ordained in other traditions. And left them because of their conscience. They had to have their integrity, and they came here. And Curtis Reese became the first president of the American Humanist Association. So this area in the Midwest is really the cradle of humanism, and I think in many ways it reflects a Midwestern attitude in ways that it never has caught on as well on the East or West Coast. So.
One of the things I kind of learned at hanging around the Ann Arbor congregation this last 3 years is it just opened my mind to the central role that this Midwest humanism plays in Unitarian Universalist history. That coming from New England and serving in Worcester, I had this vision of our heritage, which was, the story that we tell about the Puritans and the Unitarian controversy and the town churches and the town green, the churches and the town green, and that whole history as being our history. And there's this other whole branch that comes out of the Midwest. That's the humanist history. That in many ways is as influential and as formative to the way we do things as this other, even though it's older, history on that side. One of the things that's striking me as you're listening here is, as I'm listening to you guys, is, and you use the phrase congregational humanism. And out of all, are there, I mean, aside from the ethical culture folks, are other humanist, atheist organizations like Sunday Assemblies building congregations? And what a difference that makes, because congregational worship, whatever you want to, however you want to define that, is the ritual of Unitarian Universalism, right? And it's a holistic thing. It baptizes your baby and it buries your grandmother, and it does everything in between. And almost all other organizations, other than religious congregations, only take little slices out of life, right? They're something you belong to in your 20s, or they're something you talk about in your 70s, but they're not the full spectrum. So, the fact that you have a congregational history.
I have another question. I want to jump in real quick. The term religion means different things to different people. When Reverend Breeden says we leave religion out of it, I'm curious what is being left out.
The language or the God symbol, I would say, is the basic thing we leave out. We don't really know what to make of that, and so we just leave it out. But in terms of singing together, in terms certainly of pastoral care, to sort of mix that with Tom's question, last week I was called to testify before the state Senate about a death with dignity bill. Now, that room was full of agnostics and atheists and humanists, but I was the one wearing a priest collar and speaking, because I'm a Unitarian Universalist and we're in what I call the religion game. They know that we're in the religion biz. The humanists are not being asked to speak. They don't have professional clergy, and so how do they even get seen in that landscape? But people know that we are on this side. The same is true in gay marriage. We're on this side, and we're in the religion business, and we're going to show up in collars, And then you've got our anti over there in the same business with their voices. So we're able to balance those voices out. Atheists have simply left the game, right? And so they don't figure into this conversation, unfortunately, maybe, but that's just the case.
And something that I would say about kind of what we mean by religion, or what I mean by religion at this place and for Unitarian Universalism more broadly, is that I describe myself as religious but not spiritual, to switch the spiritual but not religious on its head. And for me, what that means is that I'm community focused, right? By being a congregational humanist, what to me worship and religious tradition is about coming together as a community, an intentional community that's setting about to do something. It's not just an accidental, happenstance community. Like, this place exists for a purpose or many purposes, but that we come together for something, instead of just we happen to be in the same room together.
Right. And I love Tom's writing, by the way, Tom. Let me give you a shout out for your good writing. And one of the things that you've written about that I think is great is about social engagement among Unitarians and Universalists over time. This congregation has always been very, very progressive. John Dietrich, 1 year after he arrived, was a pacifist in the First World War. Now, if you stop and think about it, they were hanging people from lampposts for being pacifists in the First World War. So that's pretty radical. We formed a credit union during the Great Depression to help people borrow money. We've always, and we also happen to have a communist theater group during that time. And those kinds of things. One of our ministers in the 40s and 50s, Carl Storm, wrote his dissertation on Marxism. He was clearly a Marxist and was accepted as that during the 1950s, which is scary. We've always stuck to that left side, and one of the reasons for that, I think, is that humanism is dedicated to progressivism. always, because we don't have any scriptures to tie us down. So when a good progressive idea comes up, we're already there, So.
And Aisha, I see we have another viewer question.
Apparently not.
Another one, read it, because I just read the ones that I could see.
Okay.
Got it.
We have about,
Then I have a question. In our last minute.
And you're a viewer. Come on.
Do you at the society? Do y'all talk about covenant? Covenant is something that so many churches are talking about. We're bound together not by creed, by covenant. Is that a word?
Yes. Oh yes, we have a staff covenant, and we have a covenant among our members. We do that good, grand old UU covenant every week. Love is the spirit of this church. We do that every week, so yeah, we talk about that quite a bit. Again, because being outside what we see as hierarchy, Bob Dylan said it best: to be outside the law, you must be honest, right? So we have to have covenant because we don't agree with most hierarchical systems. So. I should point out, by the way, behind me is our logo, and that kind of is, if you can see that kind of is us. It's based on the tree of life that was a symbol for many years here, with the colors of the leaves saying, we're with you all from cradle to grave. But also you'll see that the chalice is in our logo. And that's kind of how we feel about it, is that Unitarian Universalism is part of us, but it's not all of us. So kind of graphic there.
That reminds me kind of some of the old New England churches that were themselves long before merger, and in fact, in many cases, long before the AUA itself. And so Unitarianism and Unitarian Universalism is a current garment, not the body. Geez, I just come up with that kind of stuff.
Hey, brilliant.
But I got to laugh.
Question: if in the last bit, what do you mean by non-hierarchical? To what are you referring when you say that?
The Humanist Manifestos and the Amsterdam Agreement, which is a European form of that, all say that we must break down all hierarchical systems. That would include patriarchy. It certainly includes white privilege. We have to break those down, and we have to be a place where no oppression exists. And many of us find Christianity to have been an oppressive force in society and on our own lives. So we really believe that we are a place that fights all hierarchical systems. Now that's aspirational, but
and to Tom's point about the idea of Unitarian Universalism being a garment, I really like that analogy, because I think for this congregation, it might have been a more active conversation over time, but we are recommitting to be Unitarian Universalists on a regular basis, annually. When we say we're doing this, it might not be that it comes up as a question posed on the floor every year, but we've consistently over time said, yes, still we're Unitarian Universalists. As we've moved to be more and more humanist, it's and we're Unitarian Universalist always. But the idea is that it's always a question, I think, which is really important.
Yeah, one of our catchphrases is we are a safe place for dangerous ideas, and we mean all dangerous ideas.
Speaking of dangerous ideas, we're going to have we're coming to the end of our program here today, and thank you to David and Kevin for speaking with us today, telling us about First Unitarian Society in Minneapolis and the Humanist Institute. Next week, we have our two candidates for president of the UUA with us, Reverend Allison Miller and Reverend Susan Frederick Gray. And so that we're looking forward to that as a great hour, and it will be recorded and available on YouTube afterwards. I know many people are anxious to get to see these candidates more up close and in a more relaxed setting than just Facebook pages, etc., if they don't know them yet. So we invite you all to come back and meet the candidates. I imagine we'll do this many more times in the long campaign that lies ahead. Right? So we look forward to hosting them and having all of you with us as well. So thanks, and that's it for the VUU this week. Thank you, Dave.